I enlisted at the age of 18 in the Enlisted Reserve Corps.
And when was that?
That was in December of 1942. And then I graduated. I had graduated from high school, so I was in college, University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. So by enlisting, instead of waiting to be drafted, I could go to college until the Army wanted me. And so you stayed in college until they said, now you come in.
What were you studying?
Political science and government. Well, actually, in those days, I changed it. I was a pre-med at that time, but I changed it later on.
No wonder they let you stay in college.
Yeah, that's a pre-med at that time, yeah.
So what did you do in the war then?
Right. They didn't let us stay there in that program too long. What they did is they formed a group of soldiers called the Army Specialized Training Program, ASTP. And the purpose of that was to send all these so-called bright young potential college boys and some already existing college boys back to college in uniform to study primarily engineering. So I was put in that ASTP program and sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I took basic training as an infantry man, combat infantry man with a rifle. And they teach you how to shoot, crawl under barbed wire, face the enemy, and kill or be killed. That's where they teach you that. So.
How did that go over with you?
Went over with me okay. I was a very patriotic guy. I was in the Boy Scouts before I went in the service. And that was a profound influence in my life because scouting was very patriotic in those days. You learn how to salute the flag, you learn how to do the Pledge of Allegiance, you learn how to do close order drills, so I already had experience there when I went in. Now when I went in, I finished the program at Fort Benning, Georgia as an infantryman, and I was given the blue braid as infantry soldier. And from there I was sent to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and I was in the 106th Infantry Division as an assistant machine gunner. That division got wiped out in the Battle of the Bulge. What happened though, in August of 43 rather, they took 2,000 of us out of the 106th. A full division in those days was approximately 15,000 men total. So they needed replacement so badly in Europe. Patton and Bradley and Eisenhower insisted they closed down the ASTP program and they put us all in these various infantry units. And then I was pulled out as a replacement, individual replacement. And I was sent over. I was sent over on a ship through England down to Southampton, put on a freighter, went through the English Channel and through the minefields and over the side of the ship, down the ropes, right on to Omaha Beach. Omaha Beach had already been, D-Day had already been taken. This was months later. I came in on shore and I looked around and you could see all the debris and you could see the guns, the German guns on each side. They lined us up, they marched us over to the side there, Pont de Hoc, and that's the first time I saw Pont de Hoc. I've been there 2 times since. And there you saw about 3,000 graves already, temporary with wooden crosses and wooden stars of David. They marched us up, put us in the replacement depot, and I wound up in the 35th Infantry Division as a PFC.
I see you have a marksman.
This is the combat infantry badge.
Okay.
That meant that I fought in combat, which I did for 200 days in combat straight. I went in as a PFC. In 12 weeks, I was an acting platoon sergeant. I saw a lot of combat. I was in the Battle of the Bulge. I experienced the extreme cold, the misery. 58 men in my company were killed, 200 wounded. I was one of the lucky ones that never got wounded.
How did you survive?
And
How did you just...
you survive. I say a lot of it is luck, fortune, and you survive. I think I developed skills how to hit the ground, how to find cover. They called it cover. They teach you cover and concealment when you're in basic training. Cover is to get out of the line of fire, and I learned how to keep myself out of fire. I became an acting platoon sergeant in a number of weeks. Then I was sent out on many patrols behind the German lines, and I had a lot of action there, shooting up Germans and ambush patrols and contact reconnaissance patrols, and I had a lot of experience there. I'll tell you one experience that I remember particularly. I was leading a patrol behind the lines, and my company commander had asked me to determine, where the Germans were located. And I used to lead my own patrols because the men sometimes were not as aggressive, so I would take the point and with arm and hand movements guide my patrol. And it's about a foot of snow at least all over the ground. And all of a sudden I'm standing there in a wooded area and the ground moves under me. And right there's a foxhole there, and there's a German soldier in the foxhole with his face down and with a white sheet over his back, and he was shaking like mad. I knew I'd stumbled right into a German emplacement. So I was carrying an M1 rifle, so I took my bayonet out. I put my bayonet on the rifle and I put it right on the back of his neck. And I yelled out in English. I don't know if any of you people can speak English, but you can understand what I'm doing here. If anybody shoots at me or any member of my patrol, I'm going to kill your buddy. And then I ordered my men out one by one in back of me. And then I had my last guy covering me, and I backed down. And I got out of the woods. They let me out of there. I ran down a ravine all the way down several hundred yards, and there's my company commander following me with the whole company. 178 men in the company. At that time, we were short-handed because so many people had gotten killed. There might have been maybe a total of 70 or 80 men left in the company. So he was following me. I said, Captain Asbel, I said, stop the company, hit the ground. The Krauts are up in front of us. They're going to ambush us. And everybody hit the ground. And fortunately that happened. Otherwise, they would have caught us in crossfire. And they did open up on us with some machine gun fire. And I remember that. That's one of my specific things.
Close call.
That's a combat call. Now, one of my interesting stories that I like to tell. They were moving us up on these 40 and 8s. In World War I, they were called 40 and 8s. They were these little trolley Toonerville type cars that they used to move the troops up in World War I. Well, they were still using some of those in World War II. So we get to Verdun, and Verdun was not a battlefield in World War II. It was in World War I. So I got all excited as they were turning the train around to go in another direction. So I told my men, I said, I'm going to run into the town. I said, this is Verdun. I said, let's see if I can get some bread or something, bring back to you guys. You wait for me here. I should be back before the train is turned around. So I run into the town, and there's a boulangerie. That's a bakery. So I run in there, and there's a woman standing down at the end of at the table there. I said, Madame. She says, oh, Monsieur. I said, donnez-moi du pain, s'il vous plaît. And she says, oh, bien. And so she goes and gets a big loaf of black bread and hands it to me. I said, combien? She said, 8 francs. That's 8 francs. It was 16 cents. She was only going to charge me for that bread. So I took it, and I thank her, merci beaucoup, merci beaucoup. And we're walking back down the street, and now I see a brasserie with the door open. And I look down there, and at the end of the bar, there's a man sitting down there, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and he said, Vous êtes américain soldat? Je suis américain soldat. Mais oui. Oh, c'est bon, c'est bon. And he comes running up to me, and he says, I speak English. I said, wonderful. He said, I was in America for many years. I said, you were? He said, yes. and he points at a poster on the wall. And it's a boxer in a professional boxing stance, and that was Marcel Cerdan, the famous middleweight boxer, Edith Piaf's boyfriend. That's one of my great stories for World War II. So I said goodbye to him, and I kept riding. I said, it's a good thing I got back to the train. I'd be AWOL, right? And the train was ready to move out, and I got back on the train. So that's one of the stories.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just amazing, the moments like that.
The worst of it was, though, in the Battle of the Bulge, it was so cold, and we didn't have winter clothes. And we were in Patton's 3rd Army at the time, the 35th Infantry Division. I was in E Company, 137th Infantry Regiment. See this cap? There's my regimental crest, the 137th Infantry Regiment. And this is the patch, the 35th Infantry, the wagon wheel Santa Fe patch. And this is my staff sergeant's stripe. Here's my combat infantry badge. Here's a Bronze Star that I got for meritorious service in the Ruhr pocket in the Germany. And I have a number of others. Later on, I stayed in the Army Reserve after the war. I went back to college, and I got in the advanced ROTC. If you've been a top 3 grader, which the staff sergeant at that time was the 3rd from the top, you could skip the first 2 years of ROTC and just take the last 2 years. So I felt that since I had never been hit or wounded, that I owed something to my guys. And I stayed. I got commissioned when I graduated as a 2nd lieutenant, and I stayed in the Army Reserve for 30 years. Had several, mostly in Army Intelligence, and I became a full bird colonel in Army Intelligence. So I was presented with the French Legion of Honor last year. The French government has presented only to living American soldiers who fought on French soil and helped liberate France during World War II are qualified to get that medal. And the French government is presenting a number of them to people who have done that. My highest American medal is the Legion of Merit, which I got for outstanding service as the commandant of the United States Army Reserve School at Coral Gables, Florida, which I was a commandant for 5 years. At the end of the war, and this is an important story, the first sergeant called us all together and said, "Men, the war's over. We're going home." E Company, 137th Infantry Regiment, came from Holton, Kansas. The 35th Infantry Division was the National Guard Division of the Missouri, Kansas states. Missouri, Kansas National Guard. And we're going to build a monument to the guys who got killed in our company. So I gave them $105, which was my pay for 1 month as a staff sergeant. Many years went by. I stayed in the reserves, as I told you, and then the time came for me to go to the Command and General Staff College. In order to get promoted from lieutenant colonel to full colonel, the Eagle, I had to finish this course, a 5-year course. So I got a little behind on it, but by going into residence, I went for 6 weeks to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, to finish the course so I could qualify for the promotion, which I did. While I was in Kansas, while I was at Fort Leavenworth, I said, I wonder if they ever put that monument up. So I drove over to Holton, Kansas, and sure enough, there's that monument with 58 names. 4 of them are guys that died in my arms. And to relieve their pain, they had these little packets here, and you take a syringe out with morphine and stick them with morphine to relieve their pain. And the monument was there, and of course I was very emotional about that. And I was happy to see that it was there. I've been back to the Omaha Beach 2 more times after being on the beach itself. Went to the 50th anniversary of D-Day, and they honored hundreds and hundreds of American soldiers that came back. And they had all the heads of Europe come at that ceremony. And we were from here to closer to about where that car was, to President Clinton, President Mitterrand, Queen Elizabeth, the Duchess of Luxembourg, King Olaf of Norway, 14 heads of state. That was a big honor. I went to the cemetery at Pond Hook at Omaha Beach. Now they have a permanent cemetery, which is a beautiful cemetery, and every American who has an opportunity should go there and see that cemetery, as well as several others that we have in Europe. But I said I got emotional when I saw the monument in Hope. I found several names of, and found several 35th Infantry Division markers there. And while I was standing there, this French woman comes up to me, and she said, in English, she says, "You are one of the American soldiers visiting our country from World War II." I said, "Yes, I am." And she leans over and she kisses me. And I said, "Why did you do that?" She says, "To thank you for freeing us from the Nazi boot." And maybe that's a good place to stop.
Just, how did you, were you born in Florida, in Miami?
No, I was born in New Jersey.
How did you get here?
My parents retired. They had a beautiful restaurant 10 miles from Fort Dix, in fact, where I was inducted into the service. And after the war, they sold it and they came to Surfside. And my mother and stepfather bought a couple of apartment houses there, right on Collins, between 95th and 96th. Right now, on my mother's property, I wish she hadn't sold it. There's a Jewish synagogue there that's worth about $5 to $10 million on the property. It's I don't know the name of it. It's in Surfside.
Okay.
Yeah.
You graduated from Beach High?
No,
Or is
no.
that
I
somebody else?
graduated from Bryan High School
Okay.
in Astoria, Long Island.
Oh, okay.
I moved there, and that's where I went to school. And from there, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, there into the service, back to the University of Pennsylvania, then to the University of Miami Law School. I've been a lawyer for 61 years. I closed my practice 5-6 years ago. My clients won't let me be retired. I still handle 3 or 4 matters a week, and I'm enjoying life.